Hi guys, welcome back to Snakes and Adders Reptile Advice. Today we're continuing with some of our specimen checks for animals, and we're going to be looking at Agamid lizards. The most popular of all Agamid lizards kept is the bearded dragon, Pagona viticeps, an absolutely wonderful lizard from Australia, but somewhat of a problematic species because there's just far too many of them being produced. And they've reached such a low value point that unfortunately people don't always offer them the best care. This guy was actually a rescue that we rehomed with Paul's niece Jodie and her husband Chris, who through the kindness of their heart set up a brand new custom rig with all the digital stats and the UV and everything to be able to provide a home for this guy for the rest of his life. So, you know, he's had a really good story coming out of it. The problem is not everybody does. But I'm going to take the opportunity, seeing as he's just come in on holiday, to run through some of the specimen checks that we need to go through for Agamids so that we can appraise ourselves and make sure we're buying a healthy specimen. First off, let's start with the eyes. Are they clean? Are they clear? Are they open? Are they bright? Are they alert? Are they looking round? There's no dry skin stuck around any of these areas. They're not inflamed in any way. Well, a lot of bearded dragons that run a vitamin A deficiency will end up with these big golf ball eyes and they're all googly and puffed out. This guy's eyes are perfect, aren't they, mate? Yeah, I can see you. Next, we're going to check the nostrils, make sure they're clear. We don't want any mucus, we don't want any shed skin, we don't want any detritus or anything else that could be blocking that up. We're going to check the rostral scales on the lips and make sure that the face is nice and neat. Agamids can have problems seeing glass barriers and they can try and run through glass barriers. This can chap and irritate the lips. The most popular exponent of this is the Chinese water dragon, which is Physognathus cosincinctus. They are buggers for it. They will dive off a branch and try and steam straight through a glass barrier, and they take half their nose off, and they end up with like all their gums right wore back so their teeth are stuck out. They look like little vampires. But this guy's nose is perfect. The good thing about Agamid lips is they will fold down quite easily, so if we need to check, I'll show it on this side as well, if we need to check that there's nothing of any nasty description inside the lip line, no caseous cheesy material or anything like that, should be just a light pink, kind of like underneath your fingernail inside, and that's perfectly healthy. Next, we're going to check the ears, which are these holes. We want to make sure that there's no shed skin stuck in there, no signs that skin's been left to build up. They do shed in bits and pieces, but we want to make sure that it's all coming off. We also check underneath the ruff of the beard to make sure that there's no skin stuck underneath there. This guy's actually coming down to shed his skin now, which is why he's gone this very light grey colour, and you can see that very definite colour change towards his tail, because the back will come off first, then the tail and the legs after. So as we move down the spine, we want to just give him a stroke, make sure that there's no kinks or deviations. We want to make sure that that's a lovely straight line and it's nice and neat. We want to pay special attention to this region in between the back hips. We want to make sure there's plenty of muscle. The pelvic girdle should not be present and should be hidden by the fat. 2 fillets of fat will run down the tail as well, otherwise they form like an inverted triangle, and with the spine running down the tail. So you can always tell whether a beard is carrying the weight by looking at the tail and looking at the pelvis. What we're also interested in is the movability, motability of these limbs to make sure that they are good, well-developed joints. They're not loose in any way. The animal can move. It's hard for me to do on video now, but it's worth letting them have a run on a flat surface, checking the way that they move. There doesn't want to be much play in the shoulders or in the hips, kind of like the dysplasia that you get with your Alsatians and the German Shepherds, like, you know, with the hideous breeding standards Crufts have. We want to make sure that the legs are strong, that there's no give or play in the bones. We want to make sure that there's been no previous fractures. No previous fractures to the legs. You want to feel down the length and make sure that they're lovely and straight. We got real good pull, real good kick off these legs, which means that he's developing and he's lovely and strong. These are the sort of things that we need to be checking for. We want to make sure that nails are still present, that they haven't been removed. We would also want to check that the tail's still present if he wasn't a rescue, because this is a surefire sign that he's been cohabited, which means that a big nasty brother or sister that he was housed with has decided to bite the end of his tail off, and had he stayed in much longer, no doubt would have taken one of his legs or one of his feet with it as well. Bearded dragons are solitary animals and must not be cohabbed. They are hierarchical animals, and even females will develop a hierarchy and kick the snot out of each other on occasion. So you've got to be very careful. And if you are going to cohab, make sure you have the option to separate should issues arise. It's no good only having one viv and then having 2 or 3 bearded dragons, because that is a recipe for disaster. What we're also going to look at is the belly and make sure that that's nice and clean. We don't really want any staining, and we also don't really want any staining along the vent or down the inside of the tail. I'm sorry, darling, I'm sorry. I'll try not to fussy. Hold on one second. I just got to show you 2 minutes. I know, you're fed up, aren't you? Come on, let's go this way. So here, on the vent, we want to make sure this is clean. We know that beardies have like sloppy, quite messy poos, but they manage to get their tail out of the way a lot of the time. But invariably, if we end up with dark brown staining and tanning coming down here, this can be a sign that we've got some internal parasites going on. We want to feel the stomach and make sure it's soft. We don't want any the risk of potential impaction, but also just general constipation or anything like that. So we want to make sure that we're nice and soft, and we want to make sure that everything's nice and clean. So overall, this one passes the test. And we've also got femoral pores beginning to form quite angrily on the insides of the thighs. Even though this is a young animal, it is beginning to show the signs of being a male. So overall, this animal passed the test. He's in fine fettle. He's perfectly healthy, apart from obviously having his tail amputated by a brother or sister. But it's important you work through these things. We don't want any of these marker points to raise issues. If you're going to buy an animal, you want to make sure it comes from good stock. If you're rescuing an animal, yes, that is different. But by rescuing an animal, you also should really, by definition, be an experienced keeper, able to make judgments on the care going forwards for that animal. It isn't something you would just jump into, because to inherit an animal with issues, amputations, or any of the other problems, the metabolic bone disease that comes from not receiving proper care or UV or vitamins and all the rest of it, you're going to inherit headaches, and you need a certain level of experience to be able to deal with that. So far better to buy from a good source, a reliable source, who will not mind you doing these checks and making sure that everything is as it's supposed to be, and that there's good body weight, good condition, clear eyes, clear ears, nice rough, no swollen lips, all his nails present, preferably a tail still there too. And if you do all that, you should be fine. Bearded dragons are one of the most wonderful, loving, affectionate lizards going, but they're also one of the most popularly mistreated lizards, and they're bought by idiots who don't know what they're doing, and they need to do their research. And unfortunately, we end up with lizards like this that we then need to try and adopt out. We probably end up doing 10 or 12 a year. We don't sell beardies anymore of any description. They're always rescued and adopted out, and it's just company policy now. We don't want to be part of that ongoing problem, but we can point out how we think that you would be best moving forwards. It's easy to feel sorry for an animal, but if we're moving it from one bad tank to another bad tank just because we're willing to love it, we haven't actually improved its life at all. So with the beardies particularly, if you want to buy one, consider rescuing one. Make sure you're appraised of the situation. Make sure that you know what's going on, what the best care is moving forward. If you want to buy a baby, that's your right, that's fine. But go through these checks to make sure that your animal has been maintained in the correct manner. If you're buying babies that are already missing bits and pieces, the people that have bred them have not been looking after them right, because they're nipped and they're knackered and they're already missing toes and feet and all the rest of it. Believe me, this is actually quite a neat injury. They come far, far worse than this, where we're talking about stumps and being like quadriplegic and paraplegic. You know, they're just it's so sad. For such a wonderful, gloriously tame, fabulous lizard, it's a real shame. So make sure you do your checks, particularly with the Chinese water dragons, the Physignathus. Check this, make sure the nose is intact. Consider putting some visual barrier in front of the glass at the front so that it doesn't harm itself, and you should be fine. We'll be back with more guides soon from me and Paul at Snakes and Adders. Peace.